Russell Smith is a dapper writer, columnist, and arts and culture vulture who writes mostly fiction and one work of nonfiction called Men's Style, The Thinking Man's Guide to Dress. His most recent novel focuses on boys watching girls while thinking sexy thoughts, what it means to be a man, and other issues. It is called Girl Crazy. It is my pleasure to welcome award-winning writer, Globe and Mail columnist, cultural commentator, Russell Smith to Studio 4 to tell us more.
Hi, Fanny.
Hey, nice to meet you. Love reading your columns.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
So, Girl Crazy, are you? Were you?
Yes. Not only am I girl crazy, the same way that the character in this book, the protagonist, Justin, is constantly watching women's bodies. He's looking at them and distracted by them, and he's particularly noticing if their clothing reveals any outline of their body. He notices if they have long hair, all those very conventional signifiers of femininity, tight clothes, short skirts, high heels, anything like that. What I was trying to do in the book is I think most men are like this. In fact, I would go so far as to say all men are like this. They tell me about it. They don't tell women about it. We know it's upsetting for women to know that we are constantly evaluating and distracted by their sexuality, and indeed looking at them as objects at the same time as we can interact with them as people. Those things can happen simultaneously.
Sure.
So I wanted to just describe that thought process, which honestly isn't really a thought process. It's not conscious. I made it conscious in the book. I described what he was seeing, but we're not conscious. It's an involuntary, automatic response when we watch a girl with our eyes cross the street.
It's always there. And do you think when you whistle at a girl or watch a girl or call out to a girl that the girl has the power or you have the power?
Well, I would never whistle or call out to a girl. I have difficulty speaking to strangers even in social situations where I've been introduced. So that's going to be far too difficult for me. A question I discuss in the book is who has the power if you are staring helplessly in lust at somebody? I always feel a particular weakness and lack of power when I'm in that situation. You
know, as a female, some men look at you and you think, you want to do more than have a conversation with me. It's somehow in the look.
Yeah.
Actually, you'd probably like to undress me, you know?
Yeah.
And some men look at you and it never dawns on you as a female. Right. You know, you think they're so not interested in me. But you're saying, perhaps, all men, somewhere in the back of their mind, there is that thought.
They're always
I wonder what it would be like, too.
Absolutely. They're always evaluating you as a possible sexual partner. Yeah.
But
they may
men
not
and
show
women,
it. Some men show. I wish I could control that thing you just described, whether I give it off or not. I wish I knew how to control it.
Okay, yeah. But do you think men and women can just be friends, can be true friends, own true friends, or do you think always in the male mind, a straight male mind, there is that lust?
I think you can try hard to be friends by putting that out of your mind, and it'll work. But yes, and I think it's easy to be business partners, associates, colleagues with women by simply pretending that's not there.
Sure. Well, and females have those thoughts too, believe me.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Occasionally.
Jenna, the character in Girl Crazy, is a very lusty woman.
So let's set it up. There is Justin, who's a kind of a nerdy, naive teacher, upper class.
Oh, I wouldn't say he's upper class. He's middle class.
Middle class.
Yeah.
But upper class school kind of thing.
He's snobbish, a bit intellectually arrogant, yeah.
And a little naive.
Yeah.
And he meets a stripper, 20 years old, Jenna.
He doesn't know she's a stripper. In fact, it's never really clear when she starts being a stripper, although in my mind I think she was always a stripper. But it was based on an incident that happened to me on the streets of Toronto. He meets, he meets a girl who's been crying, and she looks pale and as if she's going to faint. She's on a payphone in the great, terrible, sweltering, stinky summer heat of Toronto, and she's calling an ambulance. The ambulance isn't coming. This happened to me, and I sat the girl down, and I got her some water, and I got her in the ambulance, and she said she was hemorrhaging, and I felt terrible for her. I figured maybe I asked her, "Are you pregnant?" She said, "I guess so," and I always thought, what would have happened had I got in the ambulance with her and become entangled with her life? It was a point of two different classes and sets of interest possibly meeting. So I imagined the rest. Justin, my character, gets in the ambulance with her and becomes enmeshed in her life, which is a life that has a lot of connections to the underworld, drugs and crime. And Justin becomes fixated and fascinated by that.
And a life he certainly didn't know much about.
He's had a very boring life with his middle-class friends. Yeah.
Yes.
And he's been sexually frustrated by them, too.
But as the story goes on, he does find the thrill of being a bad guy, even though you're not supposed to have a thrill being a bad guy.
This is a very immoral book. This is an anti-moral book. I mean, Justin learns that he has this dark side in him, and it gives him a thrill to be involved in not just dangerous things, but actually bad things. And also, you know, at a certain point, a couple of times in the book, he gets hurt. He gets kicked around by some tough guys. And he actually, when he recovers from the physical pain, he realizes he's high on that. He's got a little physical thrill from violence.
Right, but where does she fit in this? Does he love her, or does he just lust for her? Or does he fall madly and wonder why? Because two different classes of people, really, social classes.
Yeah, I mean, he finds her very interesting, and everything she's involved with interesting, and she's clever and experienced where he is naive. So yeah, he likes her, and he loves her.
You know, women ponder this, as you must know. You meet a man who's in the Armani suit, and he's the CEO of a big company, and he shows up at the cocktail party, and he has got a blonde bombshell with him, you know, with not the boobs she was born with, right. And other accoutrements. And she's a little tough.
Right.
As a female, a little tough, a little tacky.
Right, right.
And
bring it on.
Bring it on. And the other men in the room are just as intrigued. And some of the wives are saying, why is he with her?
Yeah.
I know it's too judgmental and it's awful,
right,
because she's a human and we should love everybody, but
you know,
it does happen.
It's funny, a lot of women say to me, why would, if a man goes for a much younger woman, a man in his 30s or 40s goes for a woman in her 20s, what about the intellectual chasm there must exist between you? And I always think that's very arrogant and condescending, because I think that women of university age, particularly if they are in university, are often more intellectually alive and challenging than people who have sunk into a routine of commercial work. That's the time of your life when you're most interested in new and challenging ideas.
And what about the intellectual refreshment? Because if you were not born there, to dirt poor Kansas farmers or something, you meet someone who was, and you were born to the manor, what an interesting way to proceed, really. I know that we're supposed to have the same values and all of that, but why not?
Yeah, yeah.
It has nothing to do with intelligence, as you know.
Yeah, I mean, that's what Justin learns. He learns about a whole new social class and the thrill and danger of it.
And the underground, the nightlife circuit.
He plays a poker, and writing the book was a great opportunity to write some fun little dark set pieces. And I'm currently adapting this book for cinema, and we're going to keep in dark underground nightclub scenes and poker playing in a speakeasy.
And do you have a star in mind?
No,
Someone you'd like to play,
I'm
not that far?
I'm not good at that, and yeah, they're producers who take care of that.
Of course they will. But the girl on the front of the book, she's a bit whimsical. Kind of whimsical but sexy, a little Lolita-like.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, yeah.
Don't you think?
Oh, yeah.
But your name is bigger than the title.
This is the first book I've ever published where the name is bigger than the title, and I suppose I should be flattered, but really it's a bit silly.
Exactly. Is the book called Russell Smith, or is a book called Girl Crazy? It's meant for men and women, I'm sure. Did you write it for men and women, not just for girls? It's not chick lit.
Look, the vast bulk of the readership for fiction of any kind in this country is female. So you try not to think at all about the age or gender of the readership.
Right.
It's terrible for a writer to try to imagine a market or a demographic or anything like that. That kills your creative impulse. Really, who you're writing for, you should be writing for, is you should be writing the kind of book you yourself would like to read. So it's an ideal, optimal, maximal reader, just like you.
Sure.
But of course, there's something in the back of your mind that tells you that most readers of this book are going to be women. And I was nervous that they were going to be very shocked, and some were.
Really?
Oh,
why?
yeah. I mean, well,
the sex scenes, the
obsession with sex of the male protagonist. They think, are guys really like that? Are they really just undressing me every time they look at me?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm a girl.
Yeah.
But I love it's early in the book when he meets her. Justin meets Jenna in a coffee shop, and he is so hoping some of his buddies come by,
Yeah.
so that they see who he's with.
Right. Yeah, I'm sure that's...
Like, look at what I'm showing off.
Yeah.
Well, you see
Yeah.
that in older men with younger women.
Yeah, yeah.
They
He's-
call it
he's
arm
not
candy.
that-
I don't necessarily think so, but
Jess is not that old. He's 32, and she's 20.
she's 20.
Says she is.
So
I actually
only
think she's
12.
lying. She's actually 19.
Okay.
I didn't put that in the book.
no,
but that's
she's
what I was
not
thinking.
16.
Yeah.
That's good. That would be worse, but there's things like heavy-lidded gazes in there too. Is it easier for you to write a column, to write fiction, to write nonfiction? How does it work?
Fiction is the most difficult thing for me, and most of my living comes from writing nonfiction. And I wish it didn't. I wish I could just write fiction all day long. But you can write a column. Nonfiction is a linear argument. You have thoughts, and you have to express them in the clearest way possible. Fiction doesn't work that way. If you just explain everything, you're going to come well across a very clumsy, heavy-handed book.
Yes.
Things have to be suggested by scenes, by what happens, action between people. To get yourself into a state of imagining what it's like, what people are going to say, you have to get yourself very calm. You can't be interrupted. It's almost like going into a trance. You have to be able to hear the dialogue, and you have to be able to smell the cigarette smoke in the room and the perfume and see what the light is like coming through the windows.
Right, and build the character.
And if you're interrupted by an argument with your editor on the phone and you hang up and you have to go back to it, it doesn't work. You need to be away from the world.
You go to Toronto, or you live in Toronto. You're Halifax raised.
Yes.
You say the city is ugly,
It is.
gray and
It is.
and hot and humid, and that's clear as you set the book there. What do you like about Toronto?
Well, it's the center of Canadian English language media. So, I mean, for someone who's a freelancer in this business, all the big power, the CBC, CTV, Globe and Mail, National Post, the big magazines, all the big publishers, and the biggest university, so it's an intellectual and cultural powerhouse.
Sure.
Coming from Halifax, after high school, the choice for me and my middle-class friends was to go to Montreal or Toronto, because McGill was in Montreal and because that was the cultural city. And then I noticed a few years later, by the time we'd gone into the 90s, people leaving Halifax were no longer thinking Montreal or Toronto. They were thinking Vancouver or Toronto.
Right.
Largely because of the Vancouver film industry, I think.
Sure, but I'm sure Toronto still feels like a big city to you.
It does,
Does
and
it?
I've been there 20 years, and I've visited many much bigger cities. I still feel like a boy from Halifax when I'm in,
Do you?
I'm in Toronto. Yeah. I still
Well, and you
feel
have
like
lots of people thinking about sex in Toronto, according to you.
I don't know Vancouver, but I'm
Maybe-
guessing they think
Maybe
about
having
sex just
sex
as
in
much.
Toronto. Who knows? Who knows? Of all the books you've written, you started with your debut was Insensitive?
How Insensitive. it
How
was called,
Insensitive.
Yeah. And that was my most successful book commercially. That was nominated for the Governor General's Award, went on to be a bestseller. I think I've got a lot better since then. That was a comedy, a sort of slapstick satire, a farce. So was my second book, Noise. And then I branched down to different genres. I wrote a fairy tale, a fable book. It was for grown-ups with illustrations, a beautiful little book called The Princess and the Whisk Heads.
Oh, I love that
Yeah, a
title.
lovely little book.
And the Diana book.
And then that was a work of nothing but sex. That was a book I called Pornography, and it had a black cover, and it's called Diana, a diary in the second person. I first published it under a pseudonym, and then I got outed right away by the Toronto media. And so I published it by another publisher a couple years later under
Right.
my own name. And then a more serious novel called Muriela Pent, also with satirical elements. But I think this is my best. I think Girl Crazy is the one I'm most proud of.
Well, I'm sure having fun. I'm only in the middle, so don't tell me
Okay.
what happens. But it's funny, it's sad. I can relate. That's so important, as you know, because a good book, should linger.
Yeah.
And even in a year or 2 years, so that somehow you remember a scene from it,
Yeah.
if that's what it's called,
Well, that's
a
my goal.
chapter, a
Yeah,
scene.
yeah.
Very much so. What are you working on now?
Well, I am
Aside
working
from
on-
those columns in the Globe.
Right, I do 2 columns a week for the Globe. One's on art and culture and on Thursdays, and one is on Saturdays. It's an advice column. But I am working on adapting this book, Girl Crazy, for cinema. A small Canadian film production company has optioned the rights, and they've asked me to write it. And it's a very challenging process. I've never
I'm
done
sure.
that before.
I know. And you'll want to be part of it, for sure. Are you teaching creative writing at Guelph? Still?
Guelph Humber. Yeah,
Okay.
I do contract work, so yeah, I teach a fiction workshop. Yeah,
How great.
yeah.
Oh, nice to meet you.
Thank you very much for
Thank
having me
you
on the
so
show.
much.